Hello, puppies and kittens. Today I am talking to a farmer who goes by the curious handle for a farmer, Falasa Shy. And Falasa Shy would like to, what would you like to talk to me about? I think you put it better than I would.
So today we'd like to talk about the mechanisms of evolution through domestication, specifically through the farmyard aspect of things, and how creationism isn't.
So this is
Because
Barnyard Evolution?
basically, yeah, this is barnyard evolution. That's
Okay.
what we're gonna go on. Yeah. So a lot of people don't really think about it much, but like dogs and cattle and chickens, those we didn't just get those from nature. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, God made all the animals" and so on. Well, God did not make the chicken. He did not. We made the chicken. We made the dog. The farmers made these animals, and farmers are therefore the oldest geneticists in human history, logically speaking. Um, or at
That's
least,
always
like,
been my argument too. And when people say there's no such thing as evolution, I say, well, evolution is a fact that has been employed throughout human history in all of agriculture.
yeah, oh yeah, long before even the agriculture that we like to think about. Dogs. We're starting to get evidence. That the time for wolves changing into dogs is going farther and farther back as we do more exploration. That we may have been hanging out with wolves a long time before they ever became dogs, and 15,000 years ago in France, we found evidence in some caves that people were domesticating snails by by growing them in these pits in the ground, because snails don't move fast. They're not difficult to keep around. They can eat your garbage. So very very easy to do this. We've been modifying the genetics of plants and animals for pretty much as long as we've probably had behavioral modernity.
I'm sure at one point there were hunter gatherers who were harvesting snails simply for the thrill of the chase.
Oh yes, definitely, absolutely. Um, and so the more time you spend on the farm and you actually learn about how to do farmy things, breed animals for various different traits, rely on random mutations popping up in your flock, and then leveraging those with other members of your flock, the more you realize that evolution is absolute. This is the tool of the trade for the food production of the world. You need to know evolution to be a good farmer. You need to know how to use it. You need to know how to use its mechanisms, and you know how to recognize it.
And the funny thing is that most farmers had no idea. I mean,
Oh
they I mean
yeah,
they knew what processes they were using. They just didn't know the name for it. And the
right.
people who deny evolution now are denying the processes of it. I mean, they won't accept
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Well, and it's one of those things where the neo-Luddites are always like, "Oh, the internet is bringing terrible, modernity, and the internet is bringing terrible, horrible things, and it's going to be the downfall of society." And we're like, you realize you're using the internet to say that, right? The creationists, these young Earth creationists who deny evolution, are benefiting from evolution every day via the food production means of any nation that they're in, because no nation, we're all descended from geneticists.
Yeah, well, it's
Be it
interesting
farmers.
when they invented cars in the Industrial Revolution, you could have made a sound argument that that hundreds or thousands of people are going to die every year from these things. Well, yeah, that's a fair argument, but you know what? The benefits outweigh still
Oh yes,
amazingly.
certainly. And nothing gets more obvious that creationism, the created kind that the young Earth creationists bring up, is just bunk when you look at ducks. Because there are two different species of ducks on the farmyard that cannot make fertile offspring. They are not the same kind. You have the Muscovy duck, which comes from the genus Chirina, and then you have the mallard duck, which comes from the genus Anas. Uh, and they cannot create fertile offspring.
Curiously, I had both of those living in my backyard for some time.
Oh man, lucky guy. Like, few people have the benefit. You could get to really see the differences. Muscovy ducks are much more personable.
Yeah, I was calling it Muscovy because I don't have an agricultural background, so my
Right.
pronunciation is only from reading. But what I found amusing about it was we had two border collies living in the backyard, and one of them
Oh
decided to get feisty with the Muscovy,
yeah.
and the Muscovy jumped to the dog's back, grabbed its collar, planted its claws, because people don't understand that the Muscovy ducks have claws.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it planted its claws into the animal's ribs and just started flapping its wings really hard. And these are big ducks.
Oh,
These are like,
certainly. Yeah, up to 14 pounds for a
so these are
male.
like
Yeah.
goose-sized ducks, just beating the crap out of that border collie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. And they, what we like to say is that Muscovy ducks are the kung fu masters of the duck king, the duck groups. Because if you see two Muscovy ducks going at it, they'll like get up on their things and spread their wings out all crane style and like leap at it and kick each other with their claws and stuff. It's hilarious.
And they're hideous to add to that.
They can be truly ugly, and some of the Muscovy duck, the breeds of them or whatever, the variations are actually bred specifically to be more and more ugly. It's hilarious. Right?
That's what happens when you do artificial selection.
Too much.
Yeah, we tend, people make fun of artificial selection. They say that they say it's indicative of evolution, that it's just, it's going from something good to going to something crappy. But what they don't understand is that natural selection is working on behalf of the organism itself, whereas artificial selection, we don't care about the interests of the organism. We're not trying to make a better organism. We're trying to make something that is better for us.
Exactly. Well, and that therein comes back to the duck difference here. So Muscovies are in Kyrena, and we got them and we domesticated them because their meat is really good. They have amazing oil. They have a different type of oil. They're a little less greasy, and their oil is of much higher quality than mallard ducks. So they're yummy. Like, they're really good. So that's why we domesticated them. Meanwhile, the mallards can lay tons and tons of eggs, and they're pretty yummy, and they produce very fast, and they incubate at exactly the same temperature as a chicken. So you can go raid a duck nest, and you can shove it underneath your broody hen, and then almost the exact same amount of time later, you will have baby ducklings. And that's allegedly how the Romans did it. So there are two different reasons that we domesticated them, and they can't, like horses and donkeys, they can make offspring, but those offspring will not be doing much for you. They might be tasty, but yeah. And then people from there on, the young Earth creationists like to walk it back. They're like, oh well, it's not the genius because kinds are family. Well, we have sorry news for you, buddy. Anatidae is the next level up. That's the family one. And that one is what we in the farming industry call the mainstream waterfowl, which are the fowl that breed in water, that copulate in water. And those are, two already, but the third one might surprise you: ducks, geese, and swans. Now we have a mug inside that was given to us for Christmas by our host's in-laws, and they have ducks or geese on them, with dressed in little like Christmas hats and everything, because they thought those were ducks. So plenty of people, you will be forgiven for mistaking a duck and a goose. But if you point out a swan and you tell a guy that's a duck, or vice versa, they will look at you like you have 7 heads and 18 eyes.
Yeah, well, there's not that many people every year who are killed by ducks.
Oh no, there are not. And swans are the tactical nuclear weapon of the birds.
But there are a few who are killed every year by swans.
And if we want to walk it back to the Anatidae, like the young Earth creationists always do, walk it back to the family level, obviously that's the kind they are. Well, then we have a whole entire problem, a much larger problem for birds as a whole, for the bird kind. Then the young Earth creationists are dooming the biblical kinds themselves. Because we will tell you what, Anatidae is not okay. They are a weird type of bird. They're like 2.5% of the birds, and only 3% of all birds have penises. Yup. Honestly, we were expecting a bigger reaction, but yeah, only they have penises, and ratites. And ratites, we're no expert in ostriches or emus or anything like that, so we don't know why they have penises. But mainstream waterfowl have dicks. And they don't just have dicks. They have the largest penis to body ratio of any vertebrate. And other birds, like chickens, do not have penises at all. They just have bumps. They literally bump uglies together. Getting a little barky there. Yeah, they literally bump uglies together. So, what drugs was God on that day when he made that differentiation in the bird kind? We are trusting you've got a barky dog. issue. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I had to mute myself for about the last 2 minutes because somebody dropped something, I guess, on the front door, and my dogs went berserk, all of them, and so I couldn't hear a thing for the last 3 minutes that I've been on mute.
Okay, well, we can go over that again. So what was the last thing you heard? Sorry.
Dogs.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, I'm sorry. So
yeah.
you were talking about penis size. You made the statement that some percentage of ducks did not have.
No, birds. Most
Okay.
birds do not have penises.
Okay.
They just don't have them. They just bump uglies together. They have little nubs, and they perform this maneuver called a cloacal kiss, and that takes care of it because they breed on land and they don't need much. But
It almost sounds like the Mormon attempt at safe dating.
Oh man, it does kind of. You just rub them together and like you bump them together and boom, it's done. Like that's no, totally. We lived in a Mormon household for a couple of years, so that's really funny. So
now I was aware of like mallards having this ridiculous corkscrew.
All Anatidae have penises.
Okay.
All geese, ducks, and swans have penises, and out of all of the birds, only ratites, only emus and ostriches, and those big, ground-bound birds that we think about have penises. Other than that, we don't know why. That's not our field yet. But ducks and geese and swans also have penises, and they are the majority of the birds with penises. They're the only birds with penises other than ostriches and stuff. So what drugs was God on that day when he was deciding, like, okay, so I'm going to make the bird kind, quote unquote, and all of them are going to have penises, or all of them are going to just have bumps that they rub together, and that'll get everything done. But then I'm going to make ducks and swans and geese, and for whatever reason, they're going to just, have the biggest dicks proportionate to their body of any vertebrate. Any vertebrate. The Argentine lake duck is 14.5 inches long. The Argentine lake duck's penis is 17.5 inches long. How do you explain this, God? What were you on, and why are you not sharing it with the rest of the world?
It's the same thing. It's the same thing that God supposedly did with dachshunds and chihuahuas. I mean, you notice that dachshunds, at least male dachshunds, are concerned about running at high speeds over irregular terrain.
Right. Exactly. It's like no, that was not made by God. God did not do that. If God did that, God is bad, is just a poor designer along every boundary. And of course,
when we're talking about the anatomy, or something, not in the anatomy, but the taxonomy of birds, and you talk about something like this, where the ratites have penises and the Anatidae have penises, but the rest of them don't.
Nothing else does.
Yeah, it's a curious thing about that. I mean, I would wonder if the Hoatzin does, because I mean, I would suspect, maybe nobody's studied this, but I would suspect that the Hoatzin probably does too, because it's the only lineage that is potentially, it may not be basal too. I mean, chickens and ducks are in the oldest lineage of neonates.
Are they?
Yeah, they're the oldest group, chickens and ducks. Or the collective, and I can't remember what the collective is called for them. They had the galliforms in it.
Yeah, galliforms. Yeah. Well, pheasants we also know are in that too, because the last common ancestor between chickens are pheasants.
So at some point in this early stage, you have this. What are we going to call it? This neutering. This. What is the word? There's a word for people who are.
The emasculation of a.
Let's just call it a eunuch situation. So
yeah, sure.
And then somehow that's passed not only, it starts from a undifferentiated chicken duck, and then from there is passed on to the rest of chickens, and also from all of the other birds that derive from this undifferentiated chicken duck ancestor.
Also, we think it's important to mention the galliforms are different from ducks. Actually, the last common thing they have is aves. The ducks are part of the anseriforms.
Okay, but
and we think it was actually.
But ducks and chickens are in the same parent group, right?
Nope.
I'm going to have to look that up.
No, chickens are galliforms, and all Anatidae are anseriforms. And
But aren't chickens and ducks in the same parent category, apart from like all other flying birds and such?
the last common connection that they have is aves.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up because I've seen it.
No
I've
problem.
seen an illustration. I have it. I'm not, unfortunately, not on this computer, but I have another system has an illustrated cladogram that shows, if I remember correctly, chickens and ducks being, galliforms and anseriforms being subsets of the same common ancestor, and these are separate from the whats and all of other flying birds and all of that.
We don't have the cladogram. That's obviously your thing a bit more than ours. So we all we know is that the galliforms and anseriforms. If you go back from there, you have to hit up the aves, and that's the next thing up.
Okay.
And obviously there are many more stages in between, as you've mentioned before. But as far as the neutering situation, actually, from a farming perspective, we feel like we know why the Anatidae, the mainstream waterfowl, have penises, and the non-standard waterfowl like grebes and loons and stuff do not, as well as the others. And it probably wasn't a neutering; it was actually probably a masculation event, because the mainstream waterfowl are differentiated not just by their penises but by their propensity to breed on water. So a hypothesis has formed in the community called the motion of the ocean hypothesis. When you're in a waving, watery, motiony type situation like that, it's easy to become uncoupled if you don't have anything that can anchor you in, which is why, ducks have these corkscrewy things that take advantage and grab as much space as possible.
Now, isn't it also true that the corkscrew of the male turns opposite of the vagina of the female?
In like 70% of them, yeah, something like that. And of course, this is just in mallard ducks, which we can't stress enough, are kind of special because Anas, specifically the mallard itself, specifically as a species, is apparently quite new. It evolved very quickly and thus can breed with pretty much anybody in the Anas genus, which is not standard for most other types of ducks. And of course, duck is just a garbage clade, like fish. If you hadn't figured it out by now. So, there is no duck kind, but if you really want to get down to it, you change one letter, there might be a duck king, and that would be the mallard.
Well, since we're arguing about evolution and you're talking about kinds of ducks and everything, I refuse to accept this. You're going to have to show me proof. Show me a transitional species. Show me a half mallard, half duck.
A half mallard, half duck? Well, what is a duck? How do you define a duck? Shovelers are considered ducks, and then we're coming into like shovelers are part of the spatula genus, and whistling ducks are part of Dendrocygnae, and diving ducks are part of Anthionae, and sea ducks are part of Mergini, and none of them can bring forth with their kind. So where do you want to put the duck line, buddy? Because ducks in general just destroy kinds in general. Like, we just named you a whole bunch of different types of ducks that just can't have anything to do with each other. They cannot bring forth with each other. And if you want to walk it back, are swans ducks?
Yeah, I'm not about to argue about whether a cocker is a sandwich. That's not what I'm... Yeah. So, but in the people who object to evolution, they ask for an ape man, and so by analogy, the ape man is just as ridiculous as a half duck, half mallard.
Yeah, it's completely no, totally. We're absolutely in agreement with you.
Okay, so what else have you determined about this from your farming experience, specializing in ducks?
Well, at that point, we've got a fairly reasonable mountain of evidence to support that at least the duck kind doesn't exist, unless you want to walk it back enough to threaten the bird kind, because then you're dealing with the genitalia problem, like what was got on that day. And
well, then let's also remember what kind means, because very, very rarely will creationists define that.
Right.
But the definition that exists in the Bible is that whether two individuals of a given collective can interbreed and produce fertile offspring.
Right. Which,
And
as we mentioned earlier, the Muscovy cannot do with the mallard. So we have two different kinds of duck in the farmyard, and that's not even including shovelers or whistling ducks or diving ducks or anything like that, which are all different kinds of ducks that also can't interbreed with them.
so that was the original definition of kind, and it was also the same with the biological species concept for sexually reproductive animals. And this is what creationists were arguing against, that you couldn't have a new species, that you could only have varieties within a kind. You can have different breeds of dogs, different breeds of ducks or whatever, but you could never have a different kind that was then an act of speciation.
Right.
And because that would be macroevolution, and that's what Darwin's book On the Origin of Species was all about, that it is possible to have one population divided into two groups that can no longer interbreed. And when they no longer interbreed, that means that the parent gene pool is no longer restrictive. And so the larger the population, the slower the evolution, in a sense, because there's so much inhibition by the parent gene pool. But when you divide that group, you take one small group out of it, and they're no longer under the influence of that restrictive parent gene pool. Now they can express more biodiversity faster.
Yes. And the mallard is the ultimate, example of that. For whatever reason, it was able to, diversify quickly enough that it can basically do anything it wants with all the other annis, but it can't do anything with Cairina. It can't do anything with the Muscovy ducks. It cannot produce those fertile offspring with it, because ducks are so diverse that they aren't the same type of birds anymore. Shovelers can't produce fertile offspring with either mallards or Cairina.
So my favorite argument for evolution, by the way, this is it, what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved going into the agricultural aspect of what we derive, and where the believer will want to say, well, they're all the same kind. Any 5-year-old will look at you and tell you the same. But there's no point in the evolutionary tree where if you look at, if you start to include the fossil forms as well in the same category.
Oh, we mean, no.
then there's no point at which it's not the same kind anymore. If you go step to step, these are both the same thing. These are both the same thing. These are both the same thing. But you go far enough down that the old concept of the evolutionary ladder, we'll just use that for a moment just to keep it linear.
Right.
If you go down enough of those rungs, you realize, well, we've strayed quite a hell of a long way from what we started with.
Quite a way, yes.
And now we have to say that, well, that's macroevolution, and that's impossible. Well, how you took step by step by step, and it all synced up all the way down here.
Every single time.
Now you're looking back and, well, oops, now it looks different. What did I do?
Oh, yeah, every single time. And ducks as a whole, we don't have to go anywhere other than ducks. Ducks destroy the biblical created kind. It's not a thing. It's not because we are a duck farmer, and we learned this not through going to college or anything like that, but as we like to say, by slogging through chicken shit and watching ducks fuck all day. That's how that's how you learn. That's how you can figure out that evolution is real and creationism is complete and total bunk.
I don't know where we can go from here.
We don't really have to go anywhere from here, if you think that's good. It was really fun.
Okay, so I'm going to let you make a closing statement, if you would, and because I don't know how we're going to top what you just said, and I think we've just about covered it, unless there's something I'm overlooking, and you're welcome to fill that in here.
We mean, long story short, every young Earth creationist benefits from evolution on the daily basis, just the same as every neo-Luddite benefits from the internet every time they complain about how it's bringing the downfall of society. The only thing that people are missing is actually going out to the farm and seeing how their food is made. And once they go out there, you can learn all you need to know to provide capable evidence of evolution and to completely annihilate creationism, at least biblical creationism, on the farmyard.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
All right. Philosophy. It takes me a little practice to be able to say that. All right. Thank you for being on. It was a bucket of chuckles. I hope to have another chat.
Thank you for having us. Yeah. Have a great night. Stay safe.